So, devotees, welcome to our third day of the Gita Sandesh program, of the Advanced Bhagavad Gita program. So, today the chapter that we're going to cover is called Karma Yoga. However, before we begin, let's just do a quick recap of chapter 2. So, chapter 1 ends with Arjuna having given reasons why he should not fight. And Krishna chastises Arjuna right away in chapter 2. And Krishna asks, where have all of these impurities come from? How come you have become so impotent or weak? And when Krishna asks this question, Arjuna responds by saying, well, how do you expect me to kill Drona and Bhishma? Rather, I should be worshipping their feet because they are my elders, even if they are wrong. I'd rather continue to honor and respect them. And in that process, Arjuna says, better I give up the kingdom and beg for a living than fight my superiors. So in this process, Arjuna has expressed his confusion and indecisiveness. And the final reason that he gives is, well, I'm not sure which is better. Is it better for me to kill them, or is it better for them to kill me? And he expresses his confusion, he expresses his anxiety, he expresses finally that he's really not sure what he's supposed to do in this situation. So we discussed yesterday that the mood changes from one of friendship to one of teacher and student, guru and disciple. The word guru actually means heavy. So it is the spiritual master's role to chastise the student, to discipline the student. So you can only be a disciple if you're willing to be disciplined by Guru. Otherwise, accepting Guru is just another fashion statement. But the true nature of a Guru-Shishya relationship is that the Guru will discipline the Shishya, and the Shishya must be humble enough to accept the corrections of a Guru. So the Guru means heavy. So chastisement, scoldings, corrections, all of these are heavy-handed things. So when Arjuna says, oh Krishna, I don't want to fight. Oh Govinda, I shall not fight. And he sits down. So the Bhagavad Gita, we said, begins in shloka number 11 of the second chapter. And the Bhagavad Gita ends in shloka number 66 of the 18th chapter. So it begins with Krishna chastising Arjuna, to ending with Krishna saying, if you take my shelter, there's nothing you need to worry about. You need not fear anything whatsoever. So let's just go through the trajectory. So Krishna begins to counter Arjuna's arguments. The 5 arguments that Arjuna has put forth, one by one, very methodically, the Lord defeats all his arguments. So in this context, the Lord talks about Jnana Yoga. He talks about Sankhya philosophy. And we said the word Sankhya philosophy is really an observation of matter, study of matter. And Krishna says, well, you're talking like a great Pandit, but you've not qualified yourself to be a Pandit. So everything that you've been speaking up till now is just absolute nonsense. You've just managed to come up with all kinds of excuses. But you're not really that learned, Arjuna. And therefore, step by step, Krishna begins to talk about the difference between the body and the soul. And the fact that when we take a body, the body undergoes changes. We don't lament when we were youth, oh, how we wish we could have a baby's body. When we get 80 years old, we don't think about, oh, how I wish I could still have that baby's body that I had. So constantly your body is undergoing change. There is one thing that has stayed the same, which is the soul. So Krishna is saying, you don't worry, Bhishma, Drona, you're only killing you're only maybe destroying their external body, but there is no weapon that you have, Arjuna, that can kill the soul, because the soul is always eternal. And anyway, Bhishma and Drona will get a new body as per their actions and their desires. So it is said that scientifically that every cell in our body dies after 7 years and a new one replaces it, which means even scientifically your body literally has brand new cells, including brain cells, once in 7 years. So everything is undergoing change constantly. Change is the only constant. So Krishna is saying, you are speaking about all of this nonsense. Can't just by observation, can't you see everything has to change? Which means the soul also has to change its body when the time comes. But Arjuna is saying, hey, wait a minute, but these are my relatives. These are my people that who I love. How can you tell me to just give up loving them and just killing them like as if I'm a machine? Krishna says, well, you don't have a choice. You have to learn to tolerate. Because Krishna says, if death is certain, birth is certain. If birth is certain, death is certain. So Krishna's speech is like a slap in Arjuna's face. And then Arjuna says, but wait a minute, but I enjoy my relationships. The whole reason we have relationships is for the purposes of us enjoying these relationships. It's a source of my happiness. My relationship with Dronacharya, Bhishma, and all the others is a source of my happiness. What's wrong with that? If I don't want to disturb the source of happiness. So Krishna says, well, the soul has to change body just like a person changes his clothes. You are talking so much about killing, Arjuna. You don't have any weapon that can kill the soul. All your weapons, what you got from Lord Shiva, what you got from Indra, and everything else, benedictions that you got, those weapons can't touch the soul. They are useless. And in that context, the Lord says, the soul cannot be cut, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be moistened, it cannot be withered by the wind. It is eternal, it's everlasting. In between, Krishna speaks a little bit of an atheistic philosophy as well in Shloka 26. Sorry, that should be Shloka. Which is, at the end of the day, the body has to be destroyed. Even if you don't believe in the soul, we all know that the body has to be destroyed at some point in time, naturally or unnaturally. So then Krishna talks about the Karma Kanda section, which is 31 to 33. Karma Kanda means all of us have material desires. And if we want to fulfill them, in an acceptable way, then we can fulfill all our material desires by following the instructions in the Vedic scriptures that allows you to satisfy your dharma, artha, and kama. So if you're following the Vedic scriptures, you can still satisfy your material desires. But you're satisfying your material desires without God in the picture. So and one of Arjuna's arguments is that if I kill my relatives, how will I be able to enjoy the kingdom? So in that context, the Lord gives 3 specific scenarios. First scenario is if you win, you will get to enjoy royal pleasures. Second scenario is if you lose, you will go to the heavenly planets. Lose meaning lose your body. Third scenario, if you don't fight, people will defame you. So 3 choices. You either act or you don't act. If you act, there are 2 outcomes. You are successful or you're not, depending on how you define success. If your definition of success is I want to win the kingdom, I want to enjoy it, then you fight to win. If your definition of success is I just want to do my duty, I don't care about the results, then you need not worry whether you win or lose, because you're simply focused on doing your duty. But then, if you choose not to fight, Krishna says, people will defame you. He said that Ravana had 10 heads. Each head was used for one specific purpose. He had one head dedicated for sense gratification only. So powerful that head became that when the 9 other heads told him, don't kidnap Mother Sita, you're doing something horrible, that one head said, I know what I'm doing, step away. So that's the size of one's ego. So when Krishna says dishonor is worse than death, it reminds me of a pastime in the Mahabharata. In the battle, when Karna injures Yudhishthira, Yudhishthira has to step away from the battlefield to take care of his injuries, so he returns to camp. When Arjuna finds out that Karna has injured Yudhishthira, he's so concerned about the condition of his older brother. He comes to visit him in the camp. He leaves the battlefield. When Yudhishthira sees Arjuna, he's very overjoyed. He thinks he has come to let him know that Arjuna has killed Karna. When Arjuna says, no, I have not killed Karna, I've just come to see how you're doing, Yudhishthira feels very, very angry. And he tells Arjuna, what kind of warrior are you? You may as well give up your Gandiva. Just throw it away. You're useless. Now, this is how Kshatriyas speak. When Arjuna hears this, he had taken a vow that anybody who criticizes his Gandiva or tells him to put it down, that he had taken a vow that he would kill them. So now he had to kill his own brother, because his brother had told him, put your weapon down, because you're not worth the weapon that you're carrying. At that time, Lord Krishna intervenes, because what do? There will be a huge calamity if Arjuna kills his own brother here because of the circumstances. At that time, Krishna intervenes and says, death doesn't always have to be physical death. It can also be hurling insults towards whoever has offended you. So dishonor is worse than death. Therefore, Arjuna dishonors Yudhishthira. And Krishna says, matter is settled. You don't have to kill him. Just by insulting him, you have kept your promise. And of course, after that, Arjuna falls at the feet of Yudhishthira, begging for forgiveness. So, but here Krishna is saying if you walk away from the fight, then people will speak many, many unkind words about you. They will scorn your abilities, Krishna says. And then he talks about Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is fight for the sake of fighting, forget about happiness and distress, essentially fight as a matter of duty. Then from shlokas 39 to 53, Krishna talks about this particular section is called Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi means intelligence. Srila Prabhupada translates this as Bhakti Yoga. But here, Buddhi Yoga means the Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is you become attached to your duties and responsibilities. You become detached from the results. Because as we discussed yesterday, results are not in your hands. You can give it your best shot, be honest, be dutiful, be responsible, but the results of how you act is not in your hands. So Krishna talks about work without getting attached to the results. And in between, in shlokas 40 and 41, Krishna gives Arjuna one more option. First option is work as a matter of duty. Don't worry about the results. Therefore, become attached to your duties and responsibilities. Become detached from the results. Krishna gives one more option. Shlokas 40 and 41, Krishna says, work for me. Work to please me. So whatever duties and responsibilities you have to do, no matter how distasteful it may be to you, but do it for the pleasure of Krishna. So anyway, we all have to work. So why not just dedicate that work to Krishna? So in Nishkama Karma Yoga, whereas you are attached to your duties, but you are detached from the results, Krishna is not in the picture. If you add Krishna to the picture, then suddenly that same action becomes Bhakti Yoga. And then Krishna criticizes those who are interested in material desires. So he actually criticizes the Vedic scriptures and those who are interested only in satisfying their various desires. So Krishna says, don't be attracted by the flowery words of the Vedas. Have you ever heard Vedic hymns being recited? It's very attractive. The tune, the syncophy of the recitation, very, very attractive. Krishna is saying, don't be attracted by all these flowery words because they are leading you to a path away from me. But then if you've understood the purpose of the Vedas is really me, then you will transcend the three modes of nature, which is you will have to rise up to the Shuddha Sattva state, which is also called the Vishuddha Sattva state, which means there is Tamogun, Rajagun, and Sattvagun. Krishna is saying all three will keep you here in the cycle of birth and death. You have to go beyond the three gunas if you want to reach the transcendental path. So Krishna talks about the benefits of Bhakti Yoga in 4 shlokas, 50, 51, 52, and 53. In shloka 50, Krishna says, if you do bhakti, you get rid of all your past karmic reactions. In shloka 51, Krishna is saying, if you do bhakti, you can get liberation. You will avoid the cycle of birth and death again. If you do bhakti, another benefit, you will become indifferent to the Vedic scriptures. It's just you are interested in a relationship with the Lord and you are completely surrendered and serving the Lord. Therefore, Vedic scriptures, all the do's and don'ts become secondary or non-relevant to you. So you become indifferent to Vedic rituals. That's in Shloka 52. In Shloka 53, one more benefit of practicing Bhakti Yoga is that you attain this divine consciousness and it gives you samadhi in service of Krishna. So as you're serving Krishna, you will achieve samadhi. So when your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, and it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. So after hearing all of this, Arjuna is intrigued. He's thinking, who is this kind of personality who's walking around self-realized like this? So when Krishna talks about samadhi, Arjuna asks questions, which is 4 questions. What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So we said that the entire Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is set up in a question and answer format. The student is asking questions, the spiritual master is providing answers. And our scriptures say there are 3 parties that benefit in this process. The person asking the questions is benefited. The person answering the questions is benefited. And the audience listening intently to the conversation and the question and answer session is also benefited. So there are 3 categories of people who benefit from asking questions and receiving answers based on the scriptures. So Krishna talks about the symptoms of this person who is in samadhi. What all does he do and not do? He gives up all material desires. His mind is under control. It's purified. He's only happy pursuing the path of self-realization. All kinds of miseries may come and go. He's not disturbed by it. He has a very steady mind. Whatever good and evil comes, he neither praises it nor despises it because he's just fixed up in perfect knowledge. And Krishna says such a person, even if difficulties come their way, they know how to withdraw their senses. They know how to protect themselves. How do you protect yourself? You just intensify your practice of bhakti when you're going through difficulties. Stay connected to the Lord. Intensify your connection to the Lord. And Krishna says, you have to be very careful. You cannot artificially reject your desires because desires will always be there. But your lower desires can be replaced by higher desires. And in this context, Krishna talks about your lower desires is to satisfy your body. Your higher desires is to please your soul. We talked about Swadharma and Nitya Dharma. And Krishna says the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even if a man of discrimination who's endeavoring to control them. Krishna is saying even great sages have difficulty controlling their senses. We have examples that you would have come across in comic books. Vishwamitra and other sages who succumb to temptation, even though they are considered exalted personalities. So the next shloka, Krishna is saying, therefore, the solution is you have to try and restrain your senses by keeping them under control. But how do you control your senses? When your mind is fixed up on the Lord. If your mind is not fixed up on the Lord, then your mind will just take you here, there, everywhere. It will take you on the tour of the world. So So how do you keep your mind steady? Krishna says your mind must be attached to me. That's it. And Krishna is logically walking through how we fall prey to temptations. So while contemplating the objects of the senses, what happens? A person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So Krishna is saying, what is the problem if you don't try to control your senses? Essentially, if you're not connected to Krishna, he's saying you'll undergo all these problems. But being connected to Krishna, what happens? But a person free from all attachment and aversion and able to control his senses through regulative principles of freedom. Krishna says, yes, I've given you freedom. But you have to willingly regulate your mind, your senses, your intelligence. If you do that, what is Krishna saying the benefit? You receive the complete mercy of the Lord. So just because the Lord has given us freedom to do whatever we want to do, Krishna is saying, don't think if you do whatever you want to do, there are not going to be any consequences. There are plenty of temptations out there. Krishna says, regulate them. How do we regulate our senses, our mind, and intelligence? By following the instructions of the Acharyas. And we have a simple acronym today that we will go through when we cover chapter 3. But if you follow the instructions of the Acharyas, Krishna says you will get my mercy. Not just little bit of mercy. Krishna is saying complete mercy. But you have to be determined and have faith that you want to follow the instructions of the Acharya. And then Krishna says, for those who are under my shelter, practicing bhakti yoga, they don't have to worry about the 3 types of miseries, which is Adi Bhautik, Adi Daivik, Adhyatmik. In such satisfied consciousness, one's intelligence is soon well established. So here Krishna is giving the counterpoint between those who are connected to him and those who are disconnected from him. So in Shloka 66, Krishna says, one who is not connected with the Supreme can have neither transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? Krishna is asking a question. Krishna is saying, if you're not connected to me, you may have a lot of material intelligence, but you don't have spiritual intelligence. If you don't have spiritual intelligence, how can you control your mind? And if you've not controlled your mind, how can you expect to have peace within yourself? And if there's no peace within yourselves, how can you ever be happy? Krishna is using an analogy. Krishna uses quite a few analogies in the Bhagavad Gita. As a strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. So if your boat is not anchored in the water, that anchor being bhakti yoga, Krishna consciousness, any one of your senses can just take you, carry your intelligence away. Before you know it, you have changed the trajectory of your life. And then Krishna is saying, therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. So multiple times in the Bhagavad Gita, in several verses, the Lord will tell us who he considers intelligent and who he does not consider intelligent. So in In very, very succinct terms, anybody who's connected to Krishna is intelligent. Anybody who's disconnected from Krishna is fooled, Krishna says. One more analogy. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. So essentially, Krishna is saying the materialist and the spiritualist, they are exact opposites. Whatever the materialist is doing, the spiritualist avoids. Whatever the spiritualist is doing, the materialist avoids. So they are like day and night. They are on completely different trajectories. One on trajectory to hell, one on trajectory to higher levels of consciousness and divinity. And we talked about this analogy in the slide. Desires will be there. They'll be flowing like rivers into the ocean. That doesn't mean every desire you should respond to. Krishna is saying you cannot have any peace if you strive to satisfy every single desire that comes into your brain. You have to be like that ocean. Just accept the desires, but don't do anything. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship, is devoid of false ego. Such a person alone can attain real peace. So essentially, Krishna is saying, Arjuna, what all you've been arguing, my family, my property, my this, my that, all this is false conception of ego. Nothing belongs to you. These bodies belong to me, these souls belong to me, you belong to me. When you understand that, only then you can be peaceful. And Krishna concludes the second chapter by saying, that is the way of spiritual and godly life, which is you have to give up the sense of I, me, mine. You have to give up the sense of I possess all these things, including relationships. So that is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So Krishna is saying, if you're not attached to me now, and you don't practice attachment to me now, at the time of death, how are you going to remember? This shloka is connected to the 8th chapter, where the Lord talks about death. How different types of death will take you to different destinations. If you die during the time when the sun is moving into the northern side of the hemisphere versus the southern side, if you die during the waxing moon or the waning moon, during the daytime or the nighttime, every type of death, Krishna says, different destinations. There is no guarantee. So in our culture specifically, we know that if we know a person is passing away, we're supposed to recite the names of the Lord, because hopefully their consciousness will not become aggravated by the fact that they are leaving their family behind, or they have unfinished business, and they are anxious about the fact that they've not done this, they've not done that. They should only be thinking about the Lord. That's why when a person passes away, we recite the holy names of the Lord, so that that person's consciousness is redirected to the Lord and they have a chance of going back to God and not taking birth again. So Krishna is saying, if one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So that is why this entire second chapter is considered the summary of the Bhagavad Gita, because the Lord talks about Jnana Yoga, He talks about Karma Kanda, He talks about Karma Yoga, He talks about Bhakti Yoga. So today's chapter is Karma Yoga. Which is yoga in action. We said The single word summary of the first chapter was lamentation. The single word summary of the second chapter is identity. Once you know your identity and you have your correct ID card, the next obvious question is, what's my duty? So today's single word summary is duty. So lamentation, Arjuna has got a mistaken identity. Krishna has established his real identity for him, which is he is a spirit soul. So now that you know that your identity is that you are actually spirit soul eternally, then as a spirit soul, what is your duty? That's the essence of today's chapter, and the single word summary for today is duty. We said throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's emphasis is on dharma and not on karma. Although today's chapter is titled Karma Yoga, it's about acting in a dharmic way, understanding your duties and responsibilities. So let's offer our most humble obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So Krishna has spoken quite a bit. Arjuna has asked a few questions. Krishna has answered those questions about who are these people who are in this deep samadhi. They seem to have conquered everything. They seem to be quite peaceful. So after Krishna has criticized those who have very lower desires, who are only interested in materialistic things and ritualistic things, essentially they follow religion just to satisfy their desires. They don't follow religion for the sake of acquiring wisdom. So this entire concept of developing detachment while performing one's duties is actually karma yoga, which is we have the right to act, but we don't have the right to the fruits of the action. Therefore, we should become attached to duty and become detached from results. So to further enhance this particular topic, the Lord will speak today, but it is actually in response to Arjuna's questions. So let's look at how chapter 3 begins. Chapter 3 begins with Arjuna being confused. Krishna has spoken quite a bit. And Arjuna's thinking, wait a minute, you just confused me. Therefore, it begins with a question. Arjuna saying, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly work if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Now, in the previous chapter, in chapter 2, there was one particular verse that we read where the Lord has told Arjuna, you stay away from all abominable activities by using your intelligence. And Arjuna's thinking, Acha, you told me to stay away from all abominable activities by using my intelligence. And then you're concluding the chapter by saying, get up and fight, be determined and fight. So in relation to that confused, what seems to have confused Arjuna, Arjuna is asking this question. Why are you asking me to fight? You're telling me to use my intelligence. Why can't I use my intelligence not to fight? Why are you saying that intelligence is better than the fruitive worker? So I'm using my intelligence. I don't want to chase this kingdom. Why can't I do that? You just gave me two options. Why can't I select the option that I want? So Arjuna says, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, Please tell me which will be most beneficial for me. So Arjuna is asking a question. You talked about all these Stita Prajna and these people who have achieved Samadhi. Well, I also don't want to do this kind of nonsense work, fighting, violence, all of this. I'm intelligent. Why won't you let me walk away? Why are you asking me to fight after you just instructed me that self-realized souls, they are beyond this happiness and distress? So Arjuna is thinking, I'm also beyond that, so why I can't do that? So the Lord has to respond to Arjuna's questions. So the Lord clarifies what he actually meant. The entire chapter is a clarification of that one question of Arjuna at the beginning. So the Lord is saying, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self, which means there are two different categories who believe in self-realization. One category of people, they are inclined to understand it by empirical, philosophical speculation. These are the jnanis. They go deep into the scriptures. They analyze everything. And through that, they achieve self-realization. And another category of those who pursue self-realization, they actually practice bhakti yoga. So Krishna is saying, yeah, I did tell you there are two different type of spiritualists. Broadly, there are the jnanis and then there are the bhaktas. And then Krishna corrects Arjuna. Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction. Nor by renunciation alone one can attain perfection. So Krishna is saying, Arjuna, you wanted to walk away from the battlefield. You thought I can use my intelligence not to fight. Krishna is saying, you think by not fighting, there are no karmic reactions? So Krishna's first instruction is simply avoiding your duties and responsibilities doesn't mean you are free from the repercussions of that taking that action not to act. You see, deciding not to act is also an action. And then Krishna says, just by renunciation alone, one cannot attain perfection. Simply giving up your duties and responsibilities, saying, I want to become a sadhu, that doesn't make you perfect. Because before you can become a sadhu, you have to go through a purification process. So Krishna has corrected Arjuna's confusion. Why can't I walk away? And therefore, Krishna clarifies Karma Yoga now. What is actually work? What is your duty? Krishna is saying everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. Krishna is saying, you are a Kshatriya. You may want to walk away into the forest, but you think in the forest suddenly you will become like a sannyasi. Your tendencies, your moods, your qualities, all of that is also of a Kshatriya. You've not trained yourself to be a Brahmana. So what makes you think just by walking into the forest you've suddenly become a sannyasi? Even in the forest, you will act like a Kshatriya. You look to dominate somebody. You look to oversee somebody. That innate nature of yours as a Kshatriya, simply by giving up your duty because it's uncomfortable, is not renunciation. So to be renounced, you have to purify yourself. There's a process you have to follow. So Krishna is saying, don't prematurely think I'm a sannyasi. Yeah, this position that I'm in is very difficult. Let me just reject everything and leave. And Krishna is warning him in the sixth shloka. One who restrains the senses of action, which means Arjuna has decided, I don't want to fight, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you're pretending to be renounced. You're not actually renounced. Because to be renounced, you have to follow a process of purification. And Krishna in the very next shloka is contrasting it with a sincere person just trying to perform their duties and responsibilities. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga without attachment, he is by far superior. So Krishna is telling Arjuna, you're not ready to be a sannyasi. You're not a renunciate. Krishna is saying you begin your journey by performing your duties and responsibilities without attachment. He's saying that is better than you going away into the forest. So let's look at that. Brings us to the topic of renunciation. Then Krishna will talk about regulating all your activities. He's already introduced the topic of regulated freedom. In the second chapter, he's going to expand on that theme. And Krishna is going to give his opinion of what leaders do. Who does he consider to be leaders? And then Krishna is warning us about our biggest enemy, lust. So today's acronym is TREE. Arjuna has asked the question about Tyaga, which is renunciation. Krishna is saying Tyaga is all right, but you have to prepare yourself for it. Krishna is saying better for you, you regulate your activities. And then Krishna will give examples from historical personalities who are exemplary leaders. They didn't run away because they faced a problem. So there are two types of renunciation. What is called Falgu Vairagya, which is false renunciation, and what is called Yukta Vairagya, which is renunciation for the sake of pleasing the Lord. False renunciation is you think you're ready to give up on your life, on your duties and responsibilities, not based on scripture, simply because whatever it is situation that you're in has caused you a great amount of discomfort. So false renunciation, Krishna is saying, is you may take on the guise of a sannyasi robe, but internally your mind is dwelling on all kinds of sense objects, women, wealth, bank balance, etc. Then that's not really renunciation. You're just pretending. Real renunciation, Krishna says, is working for me, not rejecting your duties and responsibilities. So the shloka goes, Karmendriyani sanyamya ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mityacharasa uchyate. So Krishna is saying, don't be a pretender. He who restrains the senses of action but whose mind dwells on sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So imagine if somebody is in sannyasi robes and a beautiful woman is passing by and his eyes track the movement of that beautiful woman. Well, he's not a sannyasi, although he may be wearing the colored robes of a sannyasi or a brahmachari. So you cannot be a sannyasi unless you first learned to control your mind and your senses. Krishna is calling such people pretenders. They are false renunciates. What is real renunciation? Real renunciation is not about leaving your duties and responsibilities. It is living a dharmic life. Yajñarthat karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanah tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangas samachara. Krishna is for the first time letting you and I know we are better off working for him than for anybody else, including ourselves. Krishna is saying work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. So Krishna is telling us, if we work without being attached to Krishna or without doing it for the pleasure of Krishna, all of us are going to be involved in karmic reactions. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain free from bondage. Who is his satisfaction? For the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu. One of the names of Lord Vishnu is Yajna Purusha. So whatever yajna is done, that is actually accepted by Lord Vishnu. And then Lord Vishnu bestows the benefits to the person performing that yajna. And hence Krishna is saying, all of us have to work for Vishnu first. If we work for Vishnu, there is no karmic reactions for you. And what is Krishna saying? You will always, always remain free from bondage. And then Krishna says, okay, you have to perform your duties and responsibilities. It may be a difficult thing to do, but how do you go about doing it in a regulated fashion? You have freedom, but that freedom comes with responsibility, and therefore you have to exercise a great deal of restraint in how you choose to utilize your independence from Krishna. We are never fully independent from Krishna. He's given us a very, very minute amount of independence. So even that minute amount of independence that the Lord has given us, Krishna is saying, use it wisely. Yajna shishtashinas santo muchyante sarva kilvishaihi bhunjate te tvagham papa ye pachantyatma karanat. Krishna is saying, the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sins because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. First, Krishna said, worship Lord Vishnu. Second instruction, whatever you eat, you cook it for Lord Vishnu, offer it to him as bhoga, take it away, and then consume it as prasadam. So Krishna is saying, my devotees, they are very intelligent. They know all the tricks of the trade. They know how to do it so that they don't trap themselves in this material cosmos. On the other hand, others who prepare food for personal sense enjoyment verily eat only sin. So even if you're a vegetarian, you're committing sins. How so? In the process of growing plants, vegetables, fruits, tilling the land, transporting all these items, we are killing a lot of small jivatmas. So we shouldn't think that being a vegetarian is a great thing. Being a vegetarian also causes you are doing a lot of papa. You may think, oh, I'm so good, I'm not killing animals. Well, you're killing the plants too. But Krishna is giving you a solution to all that killing that we're doing. Now, you may not be personally killing, but we have to accept the consequences of the farmer tilling his land, destroying so many innocent jivatmas in the process. So all of us have to partake of the sins of the things that we consume, whether it is the form of food or anything else, even this mobile phone. To produce this mobile phone, a lot of sinful activities have been committed, which we have to accept. Now, we don't know what the calculation and distribution of those sins are. We don't know what the Lord's calculation is there. But we have to understand how the rules of karma work. Anything and everything that we are partaking of in our life, there is sinful activities behind it. We are destroying jivatmas endlessly. In every single small act, we are destroying jivatmas. The Shastras say, in the olden days, we used to grind, with our hand. That process of grinding, the process of simply pouring water from a pitcher into a glass, jivatmas are killed. So every single activity of ours involves some amount of violence. Krishna is saying, my devotees are very intelligent. That's why anything and everything that they get, they'll first offer it to me. Because if they offer it to me, they know all, I remove all the sins. The people who are not very clever, what will they do? They'll think, this is mine. I didn't do anything bad. I paid for it and let me enjoy it. But Krishna is warning us, if you cook just for your enjoyment, then you are eating sin. Therefore, Krishna is saying, regulate your eating. First, he's saying, worship me, work for me. Now he's saying, well, one such activity that all of us have to perform is eating. So he's saying, regulate your eating. So offer bhoga to the Lord every day. So you're not eating sin every day. And Krishna begins to talk about the yoga ladder. The Vedic system is designed in such a way that we have to begin somewhere on this path of self-realization. And the bottommost rung is called the Karma Kanda. Karma Kanda means the Vedic scriptures is divided into dharma, or rather it addresses 4 purusharthas. Dharma, artha, kama and moksha. Dharma is practicing religion for the purposes of making a living in the right fashion. And then when you earn a living, you have the right to gratify your your sensory desires. But through this process, you will realize this is a futile effort. We have endless desires and we can keep trying to satisfy them. We will never be happy. Today, this mobile phone, tomorrow, another mobile phone. Today, 3G, tomorrow, 5G, or whatever else, GG. So, if you follow the Vedic scriptures for the purposes of pleasing your own material desires, that's called Karma Kanda. Sakama Karma Yoga. Here, you are attached to both. You are attached to doing your duty, but because you have a particular desire that you want to accomplish. And therefore, you may practice some amount of devotion here, some amount of spirituality. But you're very clear, I will do my duty because I want that result. So you are also operating within the Vedic scriptures only. Then Krishna talks about Nishkama Karma Yoga, which is to become attached to your work but become detached from the outcome. This is called Nishkama Karma Yoga. These are the rungs of the Karma Yoga ladder, beginning with Karma Kanda. Now Krishna says, but you have to transcend all of this. You want to avoid problems across the board, then you have to practice devotion. Yadyadacharate shreshtaha tattadevetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastadanuvartate. The Lord is saying, this is the leadership portion of it. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Krishna is saying each of us has to be careful about what we do, how we conduct ourselves. Society is observing you, your children is observing you, your family members are observing you. So each one of us has to set an example for others. Especially if you're in a leadership role, Krishna says. If you are in a leadership role, whatever you do, rest of citizens will follow. Therefore, you have to set the highest of standards. Because if you set high standards, citizens will follow the high standards. So, all of us are leaders. Parents are leaders. Teachers are leaders. Heads of states are leaders. Each one of us has to act responsibly and in an exemplary manner, because our conduct is influencing others, whether we know it or not. So choose your leader carefully. Here meaning, choose your spiritual leader carefully. Don't accept any guru. So use the principles taught by the Gita to identify a proper teacher. To be a good teacher, you first need to be a good student yourself, which means you need to practice what you preach. So Krishna says, better to perform your own duties. Don't pretend to be a sannyasi and try to perform a sannyasi's duties perfectly because you don't have the qualification for it. So if you focus on doing your own duty, then you'll develop this steadiness, society will be at peace, and you'll naturally push yourselves to do better and more. And then Arjuna asks one more question. What is that question? Let's come back to the chapter. So Krishna has talked about duties, Krishna has talked about working for him, then working for oneself. Krishna talks about the ecosystem between the demigods and us. We didn't cover that in the slides, but just to let you know, Krishna says, first of all, work for me. Krishna says, if you don't want to work for me, then at least worship the demigods. Because you're duty bound. If you don't recognize my authority, at least you have to recognize the demigods' authority, who are all my servants. So perform the respective sacrifices, and the demigods will give you what you need. And ultimately, you'll come to the path of liberation. So Krishna is saying the demigods, being pleased by sacrifices, will also please you. And thus, by cooperation between men and demigods, prosperity will reign for all. So Krishna is saying work is necessary to maintain individual order. Work is necessary to maintain social order. Work is necessary to maintain cosmic order. So what we do impacts the demigods too. So individual order, social order, cosmic order. Krishna step by step is saying, if you don't do this, this is how it impacts. If you don't do this, next level of impact. If you don't do this, higher level of impact. In charge of the various necessities of life, the demigods, being satisfied by the performance of yajna, will supply all necessities to you. And he is giving a warning. But he who enjoys such gifts without offering them to the demigods in return is certainly a thief. But if you don't want to be a thief, the solution is, let's begin with the food. Offer everything to me before you consume it. Of course, we have to offer Krishna what he wants, not what we like. But if you don't offer the food to him, Krishna is saying you're only eating sin. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. So this is the whole cycle of interdependency. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, and yajna is born of your prescribed duties. If you don't know what your duty is, what sacrifice are you going to perform? If you don't perform your sacrifices, what benefits are you going to get? You will not even get food grains in the future, because nobody will know what kind of sacrifices to perform. So Krishna is very, very focused on dharma, performing your fundamental spiritual duties and responsibilities. And Krishna says, I have created the Vedas in such a fashion that regulated activities are already prescribed in the Vedas. And the Vedas are manifested from me. Consequently, everything that you do as per the Vedas ultimately becomes a sacrifice. My dear Arjuna, one who does not follow in human life the cycle of sacrifice thus established by the Vedas certainly leads a life full of sin. So now Krishna is expanding. He's talked about working for him. He's talked about offering food and bhoga to him. Now he's saying, if you don't follow the Vedas, you are leading a sinful life. Living only for the satisfaction of the senses, such a person lives in vain. What does that mean? At death, everything is taken away from you. But at death, whatever spiritual practices you have accumulated, that is never taken away from you. But everything material that you've conquered, it's gone. Poof, in 1 minute, it's gone. Millisecond, it's gone. So Krishna is saying focus on self-realization, even doing your duty. But for one who takes pleasure in the self, whose human life is one of self-realization, and who's satisfied in the self only, fully satiated, for him there is no duty. So remember, Arjuna has asked a question about who is the sthita prajna, the person who's in samadhi. They are so detached, they are so happy, they don't have any material desires. Krishna is coming back to the topic here. He's saying these self-realized souls, they don't have any duty to perform. But does that mean they don't perform duties? No. Look at the next shloka. So Krishna has first said a self-realized soul has no duty to perform. But a self-realized man has no purpose to fulfill in the discharge of his prescribed duties, nor has he any reason not to perform such work, nor has he any need to depend on any other living being. Yet, self-realized people also perform their duties and responsibilities. Even though they don't have duties and responsibilities, they are already self-realized. Krishna says, just for the sake of society, they still perform their duties and responsibilities. Because they know if they violate the social norms, society will follow in their footsteps. The society will not see them as a mundane person. They will see them as a great person. If a great person is not following any rules and regulations, why should I follow it? Therefore, without being attached to the fruits of activities, one should act as a matter of duty. For by working without attachment, one attains the Supreme. And the examples Krishna gives are King Janaka. Another example given by the Lord is himself. He says, even when I come, I perform my prescribed duties. Krishna says, I don't have any desires. I don't have any prescribed duties. But Krishna is explaining the consequences of himself not doing the right thing. In two shlokas, 23 and 24, Krishna says, if I ever fail to engage in carefully performing prescribed duties, certainly all men would follow my path. If I did not perform prescribed duties, all these worlds would be put to ruination. I would be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all living beings. But Krishna is saying, what to speak of great kings like Janaka? I, the Supreme Lord, even I am careful about what I do and don't do when I come. So this is the question that Arjuna asks us in 36. So we'll come to 36. Arjuna is asking, O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwittingly, acts of engaged by force? So after hearing Krishna talk about this is pious, this is sinful, etc., Arjuna is wondering, even though we know what is the right thing to do, sometimes we seem to be drawn to sinful activities. Arjuna is asking, why? We have the intelligence to discriminate, but we can't seem to help ourselves. And Krishna is saying that is because of lust. It is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. So it's your deep desires that causes you to engage in sinful activities. Krishna gives three different analogies, like a mirror covered by a thin layer of dust, like the fire that is covered by smoke, and an embryo covered in the womb. Krishna is just giving the different degrees of lust that actually ties you up into different species. Lust is like that itch. The more we scratch it, the worse it becomes. So Krishna is saying, Avrittam jnana etena jnanino nitya vairina kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Thus the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Krishna has identified the problem. Now he's going to give the solution. He's also going to tell you where this enemy is hiding and how can you conquer and defeat this enemy. So let's find out. The three hiding places of this enemy, lust, is in the senses, mind, and intelligence. So it's both in your physical body and in your subtle body. Krishna is saying find them and conquer them. How so? The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So, first is finding out where your enemy is. Second is how to regulate this hiding places. The sense is easy to control because it's gross and you can see it. And we said from lower desires go to higher desires. And how do you defeat the enemy? Through knowledge. If you acquire knowledge from the scriptures, you recognize what is right and wrong. You begin to follow them, practice them as sadhana. So you strengthen the intelligence by chanting, hearing, reading, discussing, and applying Shastra. No other kind of knowledge can cure you of your lust. If you have a lot of desires, the only way to conquer those material desires is by constantly being immersed in the scriptures, immersed in your sadhana. So, this is the last slide for the day. We have come up with a very simple formula to help you address your enemy, lust, that's hiding in your senses, your mind, and intelligence. We call this the ABCD formula. A, first of all, associate with the right people. The people who are following the scriptures, who are following the Acharya's instructions. So essentially, find a new set of people that you tend to hang out with. Hang out with the devotees. Pretty soon you'll become a devotee. Books. Read the Bhagavad Gita regularly. Read the Bhagavatam. Read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Every day we should spend at least half an hour reading the scriptures. More is better, but half an hour should be minimum. Chant the holy names of the Lord because that is the Yuga Dharma. For Kali Yuga, the path to self-realization is through Nama Sankirtan. In the other yugas, there were different ways to achieve self-realization. In the Satya Yuga, one had to perform meditation for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. The span of life was 100,000 years in Satya Yuga. The span of life in Kali Yuga is maximum 100 years. We cannot practice meditation. I mean, whatever is being taught now as yoga, that's okay from a health perspective. But you cannot achieve self-realization through meditation in the Kali Yuga. It's not possible. In the Treta Yuga, you had to perform yajnas. In the Treta Yuga, it was possible to perform yajnas because you had brahmanas and you had pure items. Today, we don't even get pure ghee. So whatever yajna we are performing, there's no benefit to all the fire sacrifices that we perform. It's just being done naam ke vaste. Because the items that have to be offered into the fire, first of all, the brahmana has to be pure. Second, the items offered in the fire also has to be pure. Therefore, your traditional fire yajnas cannot be performed in Kali Yuga because we don't have pure things. We don't have brahmanas in Kali Yuga. In the Dwapara Yuga, the way to self-realization was through deity worship. Therefore, a lot of temples and deities established for worship. In Kali Yuga, chanting alone is more than sufficient for you to achieve self-realization. The D aspect of this, diet, and also deity worship, because we're still only 5,000 years removed from the Dwapara Yuga. Later on in Kali Yuga, temples also will not exist, but that's a different story. So meantime, we can keep chanting and chanting and chanting because it requires no investment to move your lips. It's a God-given gift. You don't have to go in search of a perfect brahmana perfect items to offer in sacrifice. We don't have to go in search of forest to go and do your meditation. We can just simply be wherever we are and we can keep chanting the names of the Lord. So D is for deity worship and changing your diet. Watch what you eat, as Krishna has said in this chapter. So this is the ABCD formula. This concludes today's session. We'll do a quick review of chapter 3 tomorrow, and then we'll pick up chapter 4. So the single word summary for today is duty. So lamentation, identity, duty. So if you know you've got your ID card, the next thing is, what's your job description? Krishna has just given us the job description, what you and I have to do. What's our core duty and responsibility? Now, to do this duty, we need some knowledge. And that's going to be the single word summary for chapter 4. So if you want to do a really good job, what's the knowledge that you need to have to do a perfect job as you're working for Krishna? That we will cover tomorrow.